Okay, so good morning all. Thank you very much. And first of all, let me tell you that I'm not definitely a night tech guy. So I'm sorry for everything. I'm a little bit boring, so I'm not a night tech guy. But I work with night tech guys, so I right now presented a little bit what I do. It's a sort of a work in progress, which is related with cyber communication. Most of it with Jihadi cyber communication and the role of the so-called SOCMINT, social media intelligence. So this is sort of, as I told you before, this is sort of a work in progress. And in this presentation, we need to get together three topics to understand the crucial role of social media intelligence in counterterrorism and counter-extremism. And so the three topics that I would like you to follow me on those three topics to get to the fourth one, which is the role of SOCMINT. So the three topics are cyberspace, of course, it's definitely not a new thing for you, global jihadism through Daesh, of course, and propaganda. So, but let's start with cyberspace and the changing of the character of war. How do cyberspace change the ideas of sovereignty? So, with cyberspace, there is a sort of a new space of sovereignty, and so it changed the classical notions of geopolitics and geostrategy, as you probably know. So normally geopolitics was made through physical things that didn't change. So the idea of territory, institutions, borders, or even states. But right now there is a transition from geography and physical things to cyberspace. Transitions from a physical world that depends more and more from the virtual world. So in this context, with this link of dependency, the context increases our vulnerability. So we are in a sort of a risk society. This will change our collective imagery, and there are lots of threats. So we talk about it, and we will talk about it further, and you will listen about it further. So, like I told you before, the classical concepts of frontier and territoriality became dematerialized, giving place to fluidity and to a certain emptiness in the exercise of sovereignty. To the restraint of physical space, a new space, virtual and in expansion, has been added. So today, cyberspace is not only a complex mirror of the physical dimension or to the real world. It's much more than that. And it's no longer a simple simulation. It's a new dimension, and with its own life and its own rules. So what is virtual today represents a dimension of the real in a fusion between the material and the immaterial, increasingly creating difficulties to distinguish both. So it seems a little bit philosophical saying about it, but for me it's important you to keep in mind that right now you don't have a quite precise distinction between the physical world, let's say, and the virtual world. And this happens right now in cyberspace. So it becomes a new reality with great psychological impact, a new territory with impressive consequences. So concerning that, take for instance, in 2016, NATO has officially declared cyberspace as a domain for war, placing it alongside with the traditional battlegrounds of land, sea, and air. Just like I told you before, geopolitical is changing. To the territorial and physical things, a new dimension is matched to that reality. So the move is a reflection of changing warfare tactics, where cyber attacks are just crucial and effective as more traditional methods. So making cyberspace an official war zone means attacks carried out in this context could trigger the famous Article 5 response, which means the collective action of the 28 members of NATO against the perpetrator of an accident aimed at any NATO protected state. So this is about cyberspace. This is about the changing the character of war. But linked to cyberspace, social media has become such a pivotal part of our lives that we find it almost impossible to survive without it. The virtual world has replaced the real world in a great degree. And both Al-Qaeda, let's go right now to terrorists, both Al-Qaeda and Daesh, or ISIS, have been proven adept to harnessing various platforms, including the internet, to disseminate their messages, whether through passionate religious sermons or high-definition recruitment videos posted online, published pamphlets and magazines distributed by hand, or encrypted communication transmitted through social media applications. Both groups, Al-Qaeda and Daesh, more Daesh of course, have managed to direct their ideas towards a wider audience. And right now let's go to global jihadism. So understand the role of cyberspace, that cyberspace is crucial for groups, for terrorist groups, and definitely it's a new geopolitical dimension. Right now let's understand how global jihadism uses that new dimension. And so to understand what is global jihadism, let's keep in mind three main ideas. The first, that global jihadism, it's an ideology that doesn't need a physical infrastructure to subsist. Second idea, the most representative group of that ideology right now is Daesh. And they assume that this contingency is a crucial strategy. Communication became their center of gravity. Third idea, global jihadism, mostly through Daesh, assumed a global insurgency war. For that, they need a vehicle to spread their idea, and the perfect vehicle is definitely the cyberspace. But in 2005, just to give you an example of that, Zawahiri, right now the leader of Al-Qaeda, said to Zarqawi, which was the leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq in 2005, and I quote, "I say to you that we are in the middle of a battle, and that more than half of this battle is taking place in the battlefield of the media. They know it, and they knew it. And communication became crucial, and cyberspace for them became definitely a war zone." So let's enter a little bit in a more concept perspective. So in parallel to the concept of the idea of jihad, which involves also the use of violence, there is the concept of dawah, which literally means proselytism. This is the equivalent to the information spectrum used to propagate the message and convince Muslims to reject Western values and to change the so-called apostate regimes. It is a range from the traditional predictions by imams in mosques to multimedia formats distributed online. But what they really want, and let's understand the propaganda context. And I have only about 6-7 ideas for you to understand what they really want with that kind of propaganda, and make a sort of a semiotic analysis to understand what are the layers of that kind of propaganda. The first, jihadism is a revolutionary idea, and in the message, it's presented as sort of a salvific other reality. The second, we can understand in their content, which is made by some analysis, there is an articulation between the feeling of injustice, hope, and identification of the means as a way to obtaining ends. The third, it's the victimization of the Islamic community that is supposedly under attack from a Judeo-Christian axis. The fourth, there is an argument that there is a sort of a global conspiracy that intends to end with Islamic culture. The fifth, there is a fear. Fear is the basic of everything. So fear of a military, economic, and cultural colonization by the West. Sixth, the message will have more impact, the more political and social resentment the audience has. So to legitimize an idea of a strong ethical component, which they think they have, they try to alienate the population, and to alienate the population, they need propaganda and a particular form of dissemination of that propaganda. And of course, in that propaganda, there is a sort of a reassessment of the world, and there is also an expression of heroism which is based in a sort of a aesthetic of the violence and a sort of an exotic vision and appeal to all the senses, and at the same time a sort of a worldly message. So it's a very strong message that they spread, and they know how to do it, they transform it, and they have the perfect vehicle for that. So as you can see in their ideas, there is a sort of a fluidity of an idea which is not retained on borders or is confined to a community or to a particular territory. They target all the community of Muslims, and they have global ambitions. So this is a sort of the common layer of their propaganda. But for them, propaganda, it's not only a question of information or, like we used to call, a sort of a cyber warfare. It's also take forms of a kinetic military action, which means that more than a simple proselytism, it's also violence. The images are also a way of warfare. So there is no separation from them. For them, there is no separation from words and deeds. So for the Daesh, or any kind of global jihadism organization, communication and the spread of information is essential to their strategy. The contents spread through jihadi cyber platforms appear as a tool for both external and internal communication, giving them the possibility of coordination, planning, and a new form of operational art. They can go from a sort of a verticalization, which was allowed before the so-called global war on terrorism, which you can spread the message from the commander-in-chief to the operational, to a sort of a horizontal organization, which they don't need a verticalization. They just spread the word through cyber platforms, and in the lost sense, everyone could be a jihadist if they want, because they don't need a verticalization or a chain of command. All the word, all the propaganda, planning and coordination, it's spread by cyber platforms. And so they organize themselves as the sort of a spin, which is segmented polycentric and segmented polycentric ideological integrated networks, which mean they rely on ideology, they rely on propaganda, and they rely on vehicles to spread the propaganda. And so cyberspace and social media are a vehicle for that propaganda. So we can give an example of the so-called stigmergy, which is a sort of a biological term to define how certain types of insects, after a few years, they cross the same place where they were before, because they just release a sort of a pheromones. And so they act in the same way. They just release pheromones through cyberspace or different type of media, and they don't need a chain of command to act in the same way and to give an idea of a uniformized operationality. So they just need a vehicle, and cyberspace and social media are the perfect vehicle for that. So with the rise of social media, the spread of information became integrated into the operational dimension, in a sort of a mutual dependence game, crucial for, like I told you, propaganda, planning, recruitment, and the spread of fear and terror. So more than a component, social media contents also became a basis for new jihadi self-assembled emerging structures. So new structures, they just emerge from that kind of structure, of organization, of new structures just emerge through cyberspace. And it also contributes to the lone wolf phenomenon. So there is a sort of an exponential replication of all the contents in social networks. They create a sort of a other reality for the potential recruit. And so, as you probably know, Daesh become particularly skilled at utilizing social media websites such as Twitter, Facebook, and other type of encrypted communication applications such as Telegram to recruit new members and to lure them to either travel abroad or fight on their behalf or conduct acts of terror in their home countries. Daesh plays on Jihadi storyline, which portrays the West as the enemy of Islam and claims that the West is trying to impose its will on Muslim lands. Only by participating on jihad against the West will Muslim lands be saved and Islamic Caliphate created on the world reach its phase of final salvation. And so they exploit the vast media capabilities, and Daesh managed to convert this great message into target appeals that resonate on an individual basis, attracting a variety of people to each cause. And with that, they just create a sort of a wireless caliphate with the so-called keyboard warriors, working on deep and dark web, which requires a membership. And to enter in that deep and dark web, there is a pathway through social media. And so they work on that perspective. You have Al-Fukran. They just create structures for that, just like Al-Fukran or the media wing, Al-Ayawat Media Center. Take, for instance, there are some individuals sympathetic to Daesh, whether based in Syria or Iraq or not, that have organized hashtag campaigns on Twitter to generate internet traffic and have been able to get those hashtags trending, which increase their possibility, their possible reach. Or imagine Google Store, a now banned Android application called the Dawn of Glad Tidings, which once you are registering on it, the users automatically posted a stream of tweets carefully selected by social media operatives, released at irregular intervals to outwit the Twitter anti-spam filter. So this is the way how they use social media and cyberspace, and they just release an attractive visual form of message, no need of translations, and they don't need to use that high levels or a net literacy. It's quite easy to use. And so how do you block that? How do you tackle that perspective? So you understood the role of cyberspace. You understood how global jihadism through Daesh uses the cyberspace and social media. And right now we need to tackle this. Lots of things has been doing to block and to tackle this. But a new buzzword arrived in 2011, which is social media intelligence. It was theorized by Sir David Hammond after the London riots in 2011. And it's definitely a brand new way for the intelligence community to collect and analyze information that is publicly available and can be lawfully obtained by request, purchase, or observation. So social media intelligence, or SOCMINT, is a process of identification, validation, collection, and analyzing data and information from social media using intrusive and non-intrusive methods. I'm talking right now only about non-intrusive methods, okay? So, which, even with non-intrusive methods, it gives the ability to develop an avatar as close as possible to our true person, through whom we can express our desires, arguments, and expose our main visions and important events in our lives. This leads to the development of new forms of communication with major implications for the intelligence community. In that way, it can identify criminal activity, giving early warning of disorder and threats to the public. or building situational awareness in rapidly changing situations. According to a 2015 report published by the Demos, which is a think tank, there are many different types of open SOCMINT, which means a non-intrusive SOCMINT, from very technical methods to general approaches. I will say only 6, just to have an idea. The first is through natural language processing, which is through sort of a computational analysis. You can understand the language and create also patterns. The second is through event detection, which is through a statistical analysis of social media streams to identify offline events. The third is through data mining and predictive analysis. The fourth is through social network analysis, an application of a suite of mathematical techniques to find the structure and topography of the social networks found on social media. The fifth, it's the qualitative analysis. It's a sort of a sociological approach, the so-called netnography, so to understand the patterns and the trends in the spread in social media through qualitative analysis and through social sciences analysis. That's what I do. And the sixth is through crowdsourced insight, which is insight gathered by asking social media users for information directly. So in a very synthetic way, I present you here, three realities, or two realities, which is cyberspace. The other one is global jihadism and terrorism, and the third, to tackle global jihadism through social media and through SOCMINT. So this is a new paradigm. Where not only we are dealing with individuals or with, because we are dealing not only with an organizational structure, but we are leading or dealing with some individuals with any kind of affiliation. And we can understand just a week before or a day before how do they act through some ideas that they spread in social media. And we can tackle that kind of attack through gathering intelligence and information in social media. So, in a very synthetic way, that's my perspective. Thank you.
Yes, that was an insight, I would say. It didn't cover just, cybersecurity and cyber Now, one thing you mentioned is conquering a territory. Now, can you give an example what exactly it means to cyberspace, conquering the territory?
It's quite difficult to say what is conquering territory in terms of cybersecurity, but because you don't have a sort of an idea of a territory, a physical territory. Yeah. So everything is quite virtual. So to conquer territory, just to cooperate and to establish a network that avoids different types of attacks and to avoid vulnerabilities. So it's much more, because the idea of conquering, it's a sort of a physical idea. So, but to avoid conquering at the same time, you just need to create a network and cooperation.
Okay, thank you. A warm applause, thank you.
Thank you.
Here's a nice certificate for participating. A little souvenir from us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.